Hey guys, what's up, and welcome to another episode of Crew Call. I'm your host, Tyler Groom, freelance pixel manager, because I couldn't come up with a better title for myself that encompassed everything that I do. So today we have on our show Mr. Garett Martocello. Garrett and I met back in like 2016 working on Fluffy Breaks Even, and had some great times there. And super excited to bring him on. He is a freelance sound mixer and sound supervisor, working on a variety of TV shows, including like McMillions, The Great Food Truck Race, just to name a few. So without further ado, let's bring in my friend, Garett Martocello. Hey Garrett, how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, thanks for being on. It's a pleasure to chat with you. I know I haven't seen you in like 5 years or 4 years, so it's been a long time. But
Yeah.
happy to have a sound guy on this show. Talk about some mixing and supervising things and
Finally.
all of that. So, right? I know. I'm trying to encompass a little bit of every aspect of production, whether it's live or broadcast or television, and even within those subsets, there's just so many different avenues you can go. So, trying to mix it up a little bit and go as many directions as I can. So, I have a lot of questions for you, but my kind of standard first question for everybody is, how did you get started in this business?
I came out of college knowing a little bit about Avid and the original Extreme Makeover. I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but if you remember or may not remember, a series of plastic surgery shows like The Swan and Extreme Makeover, the very first one before Home Edition, and where they would give people, these plastic surgery makeovers. They all lived in this like mansion together, and all this goodwill, and stepping up to the big reveal. And they were looking for an AE, and they were also based in Stamford, Connecticut, where there is not much going on. I think there was the Maury Show, and then WWE. And then this small production company had their post house in Stamford, Connecticut. So they'd shoot everything in LA and then ship it all back to Stamford. And that's where it would all be put together. And it was the final season. They needed an AE for a couple months. So I jumped right out there. I was living in Hartford at the time. I went to the University of Hartford, and I would commute every single day, about 3 hours back and forth. Not very much fun, but I was super excited because I had a job. And then that job ended, and kind of just putzed around the East Coast for a little bit and trying to navigate my next job. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I wanted to stay in post or not, but I also had no other experience doing anything else. So the recommendation of my parents, who I think just wanted me out of the house, they were like, all right, you should probably go out to Los Angeles and just see how it works. So I was like, okay. So I went out to LA, got a job as a runner at a post-production company. Made friends with the AEs, and I realized that I did not want to go that route. I wanted to go out to the field, and I started doing some little field shoots, and eventually I left that company. Then the first PA job I had was on Last Comic Standing. It was like this time in TV where like everything was about like putting all these reality contestants and making it a competition, and then putting them all in a house. They had to live together, and then to compete against one another. And like every single show was doing this. So they did it with these comics too. And they had the Last Comic Standing house and all these challenges and et cetera, et cetera. That was awesome. I loved it. It was fantastic. I made some friends with some sound mixers and found out what they did, and I was like, okay, cool. I want to do what you do. It was pretty technical. I'm a pretty technical guy. I like to nerd out on, all that fun stuff. Read user guides and manuals for fun. And then I kind of set my course, like set my vision for, I was like, okay, I want to be a sound mixer. And, it's like one of those things where, I talked to a bunch of these sound mixers, and there was two sides. There was like, like, oh, I just kind of fell into this one day, and my friend offered me a job, and now I've been in this for 20 years. The other side was like, oh, I really want to do this. Um, and so I was the one who really wanted to do it. So of course it took me years to actually start doing it. There's really no classes that you could take on doing production sound and getting to the wireless and the gear and everything like that. So I just started volunteering to work in these indie shoots for free. Yeah, I mean, it was tough, man. Like sometimes like these 16-hour shoots out in the desert, and they give you like $50. But then I'd blow up my tire on the way there for my car. So then I'd be like, for that weekend, it'd be negative money, but a lot of experience. And then, yeah, I started doing more and more house reality shows as a sound mixer, just as like about A2 or a day play as a mixer. And then finally got on to some really crazy shows. And probably the most notable is Jersey Shore. I did the last season before the break that they had. I think it was season 5, and that was the last season. Then they took a break for a couple years, and now it's back. But I did that. That was super fun, and that was kind of like the last big like house reality show I did. And then after that, I kind of got hooked up with other mixers who all had their own gear. So I started doing these kind of smaller jobs, but with either my friend's gear or gear that I had to rent to kind of make the shoot happen. And then I've eventually bought my own gear, and then that was a whole different world because you definitely make more money working with your own gear, but at the same time you don't have to go out and like prep like at VR for 2 days just for like a 1-day shoot. You can just prep at home and then just go slide right in the set the next day, and you're fully prepared and ready to rock and roll. And then, so I kind of drifted away from house reality shows, like after that, and just started doing these like 1 or 2-person shoots, or 2-person sound team shoots, and mostly in unscripted. I did some scripted pilots; they were a lot of fun, but I haven't really been able to snake my way into doing that full time. And then a director I worked with on this pilot, this like massive pilot that never ended up airing. He was the director for the Great Food Truck Race, and he said, "I think you should be the sound supervisor for this show, and it's massive. It's a massive undertaking." And I said, "Okay, maybe." And 4 years later, now it's like my regular show that I actually love to do. And that was the show. If this pandemic hadn't happened, that would be the show that I'd be on right now.
Wow, that's a long history there. And
yeah,
to start,
how much did you want? How much detail did you want
it's
in there?
no, it's perfect. It's perfect. So you actually started in post, for lack of a better, definition, and then kind of went back into the field.
Yeah, exactly.
After that,
the field. Once I was in the field as a PA, I was like, okay, this is where I want to be, and making friends with other sound mixers who were, trying to give me advice and stuff, and I was like, okay, this is the fun part, and getting there was a whole another thing, because like I had done years of being a PA, but I didn't want to stay there, of course, so I wanted to start mixing in the field, and I was trying to do anything I could to to kind of build this career where I could pay rent just on production sound. So I started doing extra work because I thought that if a production company knew me as a PA, then they wouldn't hire me as audio. And I know that's true. That's happened to me several times where I still have some line producers who still think of me as a PA and will never hire me as audio, and that's fine. Whatever you want to say about that. So I started doing extra work. So I was making like $8 an hour, and I was doing like all these shows. I was on Greek a lot. I don't know if you remember that show. It was on for many, many years. And I think I was paid like $8 an hour for like an 8-hour day, no lunch, and then taxes were taken out. So like at the end of the day, you'd make like $50 like on your paycheck if you just worked one day. And there's some other jobs too. There's some other better jobs, but that was kind of the show that I worked the most, just so I wouldn't have to PA as much, and then I could kind of market myself more towards production sound.
Yeah, and it's hard once you kind of get in and set that precedent of, I'm a PA or I'm a whatever. It's hard to kind of break out of that sometimes.
It really is, man. It's like, you don't want to be the best PA on set, but if you have like a great work ethic, then if you're too good, then they don't want to lose you. So you have to be just good enough that they wouldn't mind losing you. if that makes sense, right?
Right,
It's like,
right.
no, you're too good, man. You're staying in production or you're staying in art, and you're like, well, this is more like a transitionary period for me. I didn't want to.
This is just for me to make some contacts and move on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was just trying to take home lunch, and then I was gonna scoot out of here.
So, I mean, we kind of talked about some of your projects. What's kind of your favorite project? I know Great Food Truck Race is probably the top of your list right now, but tell me about some of your other, favorite projects to work on.
McMillions was super fantastic. I've worked on a couple documentaries before, but it's interesting. It's just like all shows. Sometimes the person who created the show doesn't necessarily have, I guess, the person who created the show and the person who's making the show are sometimes two different people, and that happens all the time, right? And sometimes you work on these projects where it's like, this is the person who created the show, but they're back in the development office, and this is the person who's running the show. And there's a certain level of passion that that kind of varies. With McMillions, the two guys, Brian Lazarde and James Hernandez, who were the EPs on the show, or I think they got credited as directors, but it was their show. It was James's idea, and then he did all the research, and then I got hooked up with Brian, and they're actually two editors, and just from talking to them, my initial conversations with them, they were just so passionate about the project that it was like one of those things where I was like, oh man, like I will follow you guys anywhere because this is gonna be great. Like this is gonna be fantastic, and I can't wait to see how this turns out, and I will be with you every step of the way. And if you guys haven't watched McMillions yet, it's a great doc on HBO. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I didn't do the entire shoot just because of scheduling purposes. I think they were shooting for like over a year. I did a lot, but other sound mixers like had to step in to cover and whatnot. But if you have any questions back in the feelings, anything that I could possibly answer.
Yeah, if anyone wants to comment with any questions, I know I thoroughly loved the show personally. I watched it like as soon as it was released, I think, relatively.
Yeah,
but I remember I grew up. I grew up with the McDonald's Monopoly game, so I know I was intrigued by it certainly. But yeah, great show, and I think it's kind of I'm more in the corporate space, I guess, in most of my day-to-day life, and I think that show's interesting because from a production standpoint, it's kind of a quasi. I mean, it's a documentary, obviously, but it's reality, but it's also very corporate-y in terms of sit down interviews and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a good mix from my perspective to watch and see how you guys do things. So that's super cool.
Yeah, it was super interesting, and like as the some of the stuff that they knew and that we knew, but I thought was besides following Brian and James like into battle, wherever we were going across the country. Sometimes we interview these people and then we'd find out like an additional story point, something that nobody knew. And then it would change the schedule of how we were going to shoot, which was so interesting because a lot of the stuff I work on is just like, here's the schedule, here's what we're going to do. And, there is not necessarily a discovery portion there. And with this, it was super fantastic kind of just to be on that journey. So yeah, if you haven't checked it out yet, what was your favorite part?
Absolutely. I don't know. There was so many elements of it that it was like you said, it was watching it, you discover things along the way, and you're just like, wait, was that person or was that person? And they would show the pictures of like the whole their chart of like how everyone's related to everybody, and just like how long did it take somebody to figure this all out? Because that path is difficult to follow, certainly. I don't know. There was a lot of parts about it I liked. But tell me a little bit about like your on your typical set. What's your sound kit look like? I mean, in terms of mixers or mics or all that kind of stuff. Tell me a little bit about that.
For like the average project that I get contacted for, maybe like 4 to 5 cast, 2 to 3 cameras, and maybe like 1 or 2 locations for the day. I have a bunch of mixers. I still rock the 788, the Sound Device 788, which was like the first super popular portable multi-track sound mixer. It is great. A lot of people, especially I think some of the newer guys in the business, don't like it because it's it's not as user friendly as some of the newer stuff, and I totally understand that. So I also rock up with a 788. I won't run with that thing because it's super heavy and it's super obnoxious sometimes, but it's basically bulletproof. So I'll rock with a 788. I'm a big fan of Sound Devices, and then I'll rock out actually I'm wearing one now. I use COS 11, COS 11 lavs from Senkin. That's like my go-to. I also have a couple B6 lavs from Countryman and a couple other ones, but those are like my 2 go-to is the Senkin COS 11 and then the Countryman B6. Then for shotgun microphones, Sennheiser 416, one of the best, most versatile shotgun mics out there. There's different versions and everybody's got their own favorite, but if you are going into an unscripted set and you don't necessarily know what you're going to get into that day, the 416 really is the best thing. It's like I said, extremely versatile, and it sounds fantastic, and it's super rugged. It takes a lot for it basically to stop working, because I have done a lot of things to that mic over the years, and it is still kicking. Although water, because it is powered by 48 volt, so if you drop it in water, it will electrocute itself and short itself out, and then it's dead. What else? For wireless, electrosonics, I am basically 90% electrosonics for all my kit. I still rock out the Electrosonic 411, which is the big, kind of like a brick receiver. There's another smaller stuff out there now, but like I said, it just takes a beating and it keeps on going. And the same thing with the Electrosonics SMQV, which is the transmitter. I wish I brought them out. Sorry about that, Tyler. I should have had them.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah, so 788, the 411s, the SMQVs, and then, I have UM 400s for my camera sends, which go on the sides of the bag, and for IFB. For IFB, Electrosonics R1, R1As. And, my kit, the way that I built my kit is that my friends and I, the guys that I work with the most, we all have the same kit, and we all have generally the same wireless blocks. So if I need a mixer, if I need someone to work with me for like tomorrow, I can call one of my guys up and be like, hey, can you show up here with this? Like, no problem. Because they basically have the same exact kit as I do. Different recorders, different mics, different wireless is not a problem. But if you're going to be working side by side with someone, it is super helpful to be using the same gear, so that if you needed to, for whatever reason, you could trade bags, or if something needs to be fixed, the other person may know how to do it, like on the spot, instead of, stopping production for whatever reason. I can show you what I'm using now, which is the sound device is Mix Pre 3, and I've got a wireless lav that's going underneath my shirt right here. This thing is pretty cool. This is one of the newer models that Sound Devices come out with. It sounds really good, and they kind of made it for the YouTube crowd, because I probably wouldn't mix on set with this, just because there's not a lot of options and it's not that fast, and it's also super small. Like, a lot of the options, they're not buttons. You actually have to tap on the screen to get into the menu and stuff, and so that for that reason it's a little difficult. But for a recorder, it's fantastic. And you can see right here, I actually got a USB plugged into here, USB-C for power, which is fantastic.
So now that'll do multi-track recording on it as well?
Yeah, so you got your...
Okay.
Actually, I'll tap it here. You can see there. So you get your left and right, which is pretty standard. And then I've got just my one lav going to left and right, just to make it easy going out of that into the computer. And then you've got 3 XLRs represented by 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure how clear that's going to be. But then 1, 2, 3. And each one of these can also do phantom power, which is fantastic, which is actually how this lav is being powered right now. And then
are you using that as an audio interface to the computer as well? Or is that going through something different?
Exactly. So you can, so basically I'm controlling everything on here, and then this cable right here it's just a stereo cable, just goes right into the computer.
Gotcha.
And if you wanted to, there's tons of more options. There's a USB on here. You can plug it in to your computer, and if you're doing say like music or like a bigger podcast or something, you could run the whole interface through the computer. As far as if I wouldn't necessarily put this in a bag to like go mix like some house reality show, because the outs are extremely difficult, and the timecode is USB, and it's just not as versatile as say like the 788 or the 633 or the 688. Now, I will say this does come in 3 different models, and the Mix Pre 10 is pretty powerful. It's basically the same thing, it can just do more inputs, but still it does lack on the out or the outs and timecode, and better recorder than a mixer, I would say.
Well, I'm sure it's better than this.
That's awesome, man.
My Behringer USB mixer. My microphone is far more expensive than the mixer that it is being plugged into right now, certainly. Which I know is probably often the case anyways. So I was actually talking to a friend of mine this morning about, should I actually get like an actual like Focusrite or something to use as my audio interface? And he was like, it sounds good right now. I mean, why spend money if you don't need to? So I'll probably rock this for now. But that's why I was asking if that Mix Pre was actually could be a USB interface too, because I may be in the market for one at some point. So we'll see.
Yeah, man, and your friend's right, by the way. I know a bunch of friends, that are total gearheads, and they will buy the next brand new thing on the market. But if it's working for you, and I just don't think there's a reason to upgrade and spend, because once you start going that direction, man, the price only goes up.
Oh yeah,
like tens of thousands of dollars. And if you're not making your money back on it, then it can be, you're like, okay, why'd I do this instead of paying down my mortgage or something?
Right? That's kind of where I'm at, especially with the current economic outlook. I'd rather spend money on something that's going to make me money.
Yeah, exactly. How much is unemployment, and how much can I afford? Do I want a $5,000 microphone or a $50 microphone? And will anybody notice, and does anybody care?
Right. And I will say, Sound Devices is a great company, and I have a video devices Pix, which I absolutely love. And I got it as some closeout deal from B&H one day, and then I found out like the next day or the day after that they actually closed video devices. So that's why I got such a good deal on it. But it's still built like a tank, and I will rock that thing forever. So, and I have the XLR attachment for it, and it works great. So No complaints.
Dude, I am in the same position. I have some gear that works great, and I call up like Electrosonics, and I'm like, hey, can I get this service? And they're like, we don't service that anymore. I'm like, why? Because I bought it off
Right?
eBay for like 10% of what the original price was, and it's 30 years old, but it works great. And maybe
Exactly.
that's why they don't want to service it, because they want me to buy a new one. Fair
Right?
enough. I get it. It's a company. Everybody's got to make money.
So I know most people outside of the production world don't know entirely what all a sound mixer does on set. I mean, you're wearing. I mean, you're wearing a lot of hats in terms of you're responsible for getting sound to all the cameras and to IFBs and mixing and probably a lot of times running a boom mic as well. So tell me a little bit about that whole kind of workflow for people that may not really know that side of production.
No, it's all good, man. I try to explain this to my parents all the time. Uh, and I think I get better at it every time I try to do it. But I think one of the best explanations uh, is the sound chain, right? So show up on set. Basically, everybody has to be heard. All the cast has to be heard, right? So generally, everybody gets a lav. The lav, like the one that's taped under my shirt right now, is attached to a wireless transmitter on their back. That transmitter sends their audio to my rig that has a receiver on it. That has an XLR cable that carries the audio into my recorder, and I record the sound. But that's not enough, right? So I also send the audio out to cameras using transmitters, and the cameras also have receivers on them so they can get the audio. And then producers would also like to hear what's going on. So then they have IFBs, which are receivers. So then they can hear what's going on. And then timecode, which is another big thing, which is like, I don't know what point in history like timecode became an audio thing, but it was before I started in this business. So it was kind of like one of those things you kind of had to learn. But timecode sync, which is extremely important. And what that is that my recorder, I'm recording all the audio on set, and it's got a timecode stamp on it. And what that is, it is hour, minute, second, and then frame. And that number is stamped on every frame of audio that's recorded. Now, it's my job to take that timecode and make sure that every other device on set has that timecode. So for cameras, I'll take a little device known as a timecode generator. I myself use Tentacle Sync. I've used a bunch of timecode generators, and Tentacle Sync is by far my favorite. It's awesome. These super small devices, I'll basically jam the timecode from my rig that's generating the timecode, and I'll jam the timecode generator, basically copying the timecode from the recorder to the timecode generator, put that on the camera, and then connect it to the camera's timecode input. And now the camera will start reading the timecode from the timecode generator, and that is the same timecode that's on my recorder. So on set, it matters. It matters to have it. It's super important. But the real reason is back in post. So end of the day, right? We call cut. I'll take my audio card. I'll give it to the assistant camera, or if the assistant editor is on set, I'll give it to them. And then they'll take all the camera cards with all the footage, and they'll take everything and they'll dump it onto a hard drive back in the post office. And the next day, they'll take all that footage and they'll use Avid or Premiere or something of the like, and they will basically put it all on a timeline, select it all, right click, and say sync. And the computer, using the time code, right, that all the devices have stamped on, will sync that footage so that A camera, B camera, C camera, and the audio is all synced perfectly together. And with that, you can start cutting stuff up. So say if you if you have you have 3 cameras, right, around 2 people talking, and you want to cut from one camera to the other, you can just take your whole timeline and just start cutting up, and the end result will be, if like you watch a TV show of an interview, it looks like the cameras are cutting from one angle to the other. And they can do that because we've synced all the time code together, and you'll never lose your place in time from one camera to the other. I guess a simpler answer would be, if you ever watch say like a student film and someone's voice isn't matching up with how their lips are moving, that is time code out of sync, or there is no time code, which is bad times. And so, you basically want that audio, the person's audio to match up with how they're talking, and then you can start editing from there. I think that might have been an overly complicated answer to a very simple question. But I think a little bit. So please, if I can clarify anything.
I think that's exactly. I mean, I just don't think people realize how much the sound mixers really do on set. And you're managing a lot of things and feeding a lot of things too. And oftentimes I don't think people really understand that, who aren't in production, certainly. On the unscripted stuff, are you normally running boom yourself, or do you normally have a boom op that is handling that?
Usually it's me. I have my massive setup, say like 5 wireless going, and recording and mixing and running the boom at the same time.
Getting your shoulder exercises in?
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, I'm 5'11", so I've got that going for me. I know some guys like to kind of put it like above their heads or kind of balance it on their headphones. I don't do that. One of the things that I learned in post was camera angles. One of the jobs I had in LA was, we're talking like 12 years ago, was logging footage. I worked for a company that did all this behind the scenes stuff, New Wave Entertainment. So they did all the EPK back when I don't think this is really a thing anymore. But they'd be releasing, the last Harry Potter movie on Blu-ray, and the commercial would say 30 extra hours of, bonus footage, and 500 hours of, special documentaries and bonus, programs, all about the Harry Potter movie. And so that's what I would work on. One of my many jobs was going through all this behind the scenes footage and logging it. And I would log every single thing that happened that could be useful in the edit. And I would do it in Microsoft Word. And then I would save that. And then that would be sent to the producer. They would start making a rough cut based off the logs that I created. And then the editor would put that together. Then that would be the start of the edit process. But the best thing was that I had to learn what a medium shot was, what a 2 shot was. If the camera was super zoomed in on something, or if it was super shaky, and I had to learn all that stuff. And it was super interesting because I could, I basically just got to know what angles were, what the capabilities of cameras were, right? I know technology's changed a lot in the past 12 years, but at the same time, a frame is a frame. And so, back to sound mixing, it's one of those things that you can kind of tell, being on set, you've worked with the scene camera guy a lot, you can tell where the camera guy is shooting, just kind of based on looking at him and where his finger is in the focus ring and what he's shooting. And so, through that, I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to put the boom on top of my head and just kill myself because I've got, 14 more hours on the clock. That's nuts. but actually just put the boom right here. I just rest it like right in the bag, and you can actually just, it depends on the scene, but you can stand like in front of the camera and not be in the shot and boom the person that the camera's that your camera guy's shooting. And I guess the super safe way would be to put it up here, as a lot of people do. But I think my point is that knowing about, even if you're audio, and I know there's like this thing about camera and audio, blah blah. I think the two worlds should mesh. I think maybe the jobs shouldn't mesh, but people should know about if you're camera, you should know a little bit about audio. If you're audio, you should know a little bit about camera, because then you'll know about camera angles and how your camera guy works, and you don't have to kill yourself by putting the boom on top of your head all day and get your arms really tired. You can just set it right here. You can actually just walk, right in front of your camera guy, not in front of the lens, but like walk right to the side of the lens and boom what needs to be boomed without killing yourself. I don't know. Did I explain that right? Does that make sense to you?
Totally. And I mean, you're recording ISOs of every single mic, which I don't think people often realize. You're sending. I mean, I guess what they call it, scratch tracks to the cameras, but those are ultimately probably not used in the final edit. Those are more as a backup for timecode, relatively, or for dailies or for whatever else, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I first started out, the 788, which we were talking about before, is like the first super popular, easy to use, portable ISO track recorder. I didn't start out learning that. I actually started out using the Went. The Went is a super old mixer. It's analog. There's no digital numbers on it. It actually has two of the gauges that go like this, like in an old-time radio or whatever. But that was like the super thing. And the guy Went, I think he lives here in LA, and he would basically make these things in his basement and sell them off. And there was no recording capability. And even with the next generation, which was this has nothing to do with Went, this was Sound Devices, with the 552, it was still, you still couldn't record, or you didn't want to record with what they're offering. So you would send to camera, right? So you'd have your mixer, you have your rig, and you'd have a transmitter on your left and a transmitter on your right. And you would send out the audio to two receivers on the back of the camera. So like the thing is like the HVX like 500, massive cameras, and they'd have these two massive receivers, and each receiver would have an XLR going into one of the two channels. And so then you would mix, say like your boom, you would mix your boom to your right, so it would send from your mixer right channel to the camera's right channel, which is number 2, and then so you'd have someone on the lav, and then you'd mix them to the left, that would go right to the left, or channel 1 of the camera. And that's how I learned. And then they would use that audio from the camera to make the show. And it was the best that you could do. Like at that point, it was super precarious, because if you weren't on point, or if your sound mixer wasn't on point, or if your camera guy unplugged got hooked on the power cable with the receiver and just didn't see it, and the receivers were unplugged, and as a sound guy, you wouldn't know until you like looked at it during lunch. You wouldn't have any audio, and it's like all these problems. But that's how it was for a long time. So the 788 comes along, and so here we are. Here's your question, right? So we're ISO mixing, or ISO recording, right? So I have 5 casts. Each cast has their own lav and transmitter, and they have their own track being recorded into the rig. They take that, give it to post, and now they have on their timeline, instead of when I worked on Top Chef back in the day, instead of just 2 channels with say like 5 lavs on it, so you'd have 5 people talking all over each other, and there was nothing you could do in post except like try to chop it up as best as possible. But now with the ISO recording, each person having their own track and channel, you can do whatever you want, right? You have so much more flexibility with designing the story. And so, like, if this was being recorded right now on the, like, we're in the field, be like Garrett channel 1, Tyler channel 2, and you could move those around and cut them up, and it wouldn't interfere. Like, editing your track wouldn't interfere with editing my track. Now, 12 years ago, that was totally the case, because you couldn't edit your track without messing up my track, because we would just be all over each other. And then, nowadays too is the whole idea of running two channels to the camera, like back in the day, is no longer a thing. It's just what we know of as a scratch track, right? So instead of running two channels, a left and a right, to the camera, old school, now we just have one channel. Sometimes it's just an IFB, right, that we hook up to the camera, so the camera guy can hear, and also we have a scratch track for the camera. Now that should never be used in post. I know sometimes it does get used in post because of whatever reason, but that is really just so, say, an instance where timecode loses sync for whatever reason. You can take the camera's audio that's attached to their footage, and then take the multi-track audio, and you can use that to sync the good audio and the good footage together.
Now, is the when you record on the 788, does it give you spit out a single wave file that is just multi-tracked with all the different channels on it? Is that how it is? I think we may have lost connection. All right, folks, stand by 1 moment, please. All right, and we are back. Sorry, due to a loss in power, we are now back. So, thank you for fixing that. All good.
That
All
Los
good.
Angeles power grid for you.
No worries. Hey, that's why I want to do this show live, because I want it to be real. This is what we
Yeah,
experience on a
no
daily
edits.
basis in our lives. So, I think it's good.
Ultra audio.
Um, so the 788 just gives you, is it a single wave file that's just multi-track, different channels? Like if you were to drop it into Premiere, it's just one single wave.
Yeah, well, actually, you've got options. So, the 788, the mix pre that I've got here, the 688, and the Scorpio. You basically have options. You can do one wave file that contains all your tracks, right? And you won't drop that in. You usually want to split it, like you'll drop it into Wave Agent, which is also Sound Devices. You drop your WAV file into Wave Agent, and that'll break it up into individual files. So that way you can make sure the naming's correct. You can check it. You can check it with the sound report, make sure all the metadata is there. You do have an option to. It all depends on like what the AEs want. I try to contact post, beforehand to figure out what is easiest for them as far as a deliverable. Either that poly file, or which is all the tracks together, which is a little easier to manage, especially if you have a lot going on. But sometimes the mono is easier, and so the mono file is you basically get a folder, and it's going to be your left, right, and then your 5 casts, and they each have their own tracks, each represented by one file. So say if you didn't want your left and right, which is a little redundant, then you can just easily take out the left and right, and you don't have to import it into your system. And just take the five lav tracks.
Gotcha.
So for my own stuff, that like when I do my own field recording, I usually choose mono because it's just a little easier to manage. But it's honestly personal preference up to post and how their workflow is.
Gotcha. So, for someone who might be looking to get into the sound mixing, sound recording field, what's some advice that you would give? Let's say maybe a PA who wants to go into the sound department.
Make friends with the sound mixer. and express that this is what you want to do, and you would love a shot at it. I can think back upon conversations that I had with sound mixers, and I was like, I could have been a little more direct. And now when I have PAs approach me, I ask them, like, what do you want to do? And if they kind of stumble around a bit and like, oh, I want to do everything, I'm not really sure, it's okay. That's great. That's cool. I can talk to you about, whatever you want, give you advice for whatever you want to ask me about. But if someone came up to me and says, I love audio, I love wireless frequencies, I love doing sound, I want to do sound, and can you, spend some time teaching me? I'd be like, yes, of course I can. And there are PAs that have done that, have been super direct, and they are no longer PAs, and they're working. And I've had some of them on the Great Food Truck Race. And so, yeah, it's like just be direct as possible. I know that not everyone is super friendly in this business. This is a whole other conversation, but don't force your way into it. If you're talking to a sound mixer and he doesn't want to, or she doesn't want to give you the time of day, don't force it, because it's not gonna go anywhere. But if you're driving and it's a good conversation and they're friendly and they want to help you out, follow up, ask where they're like, hey, do you mind if I take your phone number? Do you mind if I help you out maybe for free? Offer to help for free. That is a big one. I had last year, the last season of the Great Food Truck Race. one of the PAs that really wanted to get into audio. I hadn't personally worked with him. I had a buddy who worked with him, but I worked with him when he was a PA, and uh, I would, said to him over the phone, I was like, do you want to come? Would you be up for coming to VR to prep for a day, and then we can just see how it goes? And he was like, yeah, cool. And I was like, well, listen, I can't get you paid because I already have, the help that I need for that day. But if you want to come in, I can't pay you, but we can just work some stuff out. You can go through your kit, maybe, if this works out. And he was like, yeah, of course. And in the back of my mind, I was like, cool. And, then I had him on for initially 1 week, and then he moved to 4 weeks on the show. But it's just enthusiasm for wanting to do it. And, it's, I do understand that like no one wants to work for free. But the opportunities for, for wanting to jump up, sometimes it requires a little, sweat equity, if you will. And it's not that I don't want people to work for free, but if I have a day where I need to get stuff done, I need to hire guys that know what they're doing. And I've got a schedule and I've got a list of objectives that need to be completed. So if I don't know you, or if I've never worked with you before, I don't know if you can get those things done, then it's nothing against you, but I need people that need to get paid and get that job done. But if you come on and show me that you can get it done, then you're the next one to be, then you're next in line for, for that position.
Awesome. And, in this weird COVID time right now, what are some things that you think people can be doing to, even if it's someone starting out or if it's someone who's, like yourself or other sound mixers, what are some things that you think we could be doing, whether it's training or even just, hobbies to kind of keep ourselves sane in this crazy time?
Yeah. Facebook groups. There is a huge amount of free information from professionals in Facebook groups. My favorite one is the Freelance Sound Mixers Facebook group. I think that's the full name of it. And there's like 10,000 sound mixers from all over the world in there. And, all different levels of skill. And
I think we may have lost power again. Thank you, Los Angeles Power.
I was playing Call of Duty for like 2 hours this morning, and it was flawless, and there was nothing happening. Of course, uh, really embarrassed in Los Angeles. Cool. Hey man, this is just another day on set, and that and this is actually if with your question, what are you doing now to don't just sit around playing Call of Duty like every day. I'm not doing that, by the way. I know. Nice. We'll exchange names after this. Um, but it when you're on set and you come across a problem and it needs to be solved, otherwise you're going to stop production. And whether or not it's your fault or it is your fault, it's always going to be your fault. So YouTube, Facebook groups, manuals, user guides, read everything, because if there's a problem, and right, there's always going to be some sort of issue or some sort of problem. It's never the end of the world. But if you can fix that problem, if you can solve it on the spot, you are the hero of the day. And that not just audio, but with like camera too. Like if you know something about camera, then and you were able to save the day, and you were able to like offer some advice like for someone in the moment who I know some ACs, kind of pulled them aside like, hey man, I think I know the answer to your problem here, and if you want to mind, I'll tell you off to the side, and then they can go save the day, and nobody has to know that I did anything to that. It's not about me. It's just about getting the show back on the road, right? And then they fix the problem, and then the show is able to continue. Because I have been a part of projects where myself when I was a lot younger, or somebody else, where there was a problem, myself or somebody else couldn't fix it, and production had to stop down. And that is the worst thing in the world, because there is a lot of money being put into every single day that's on set. Exactly. Yeah, man, I agree. Like, oh, sorry, go ahead. Get staying on schedule in this lifestyle. Like I know, like sometimes we'll go out, work for a couple weeks or a couple months or like a day, and then come back, and then we're like, okay, I can chill out now. But we've all been out of work for the most part for like months, and staying on schedule and keeping a schedule, whether it's like getting up at a certain time or going to bed at a certain time, or achieving like at least one thing from your to-do list a day, is super important. And like not staying in your pajamas, that's a really big thing too, because yeah, I know exactly how it is, man. I know like the days start to run into each other, and you're like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? I'm trapped inside, and et cetera, et cetera. I agree, man. That's a massive thing. It is a title that is mostly you give yourself. If you want to make it look on your Yeah, if you have your resume and you want to make it look like you're doing more than just being a sound mixer, then you can call yourself a sound supervisor. Uh, what it is really just the number one sound person on set, even if you're just the only sound person on set. The problem with that is that some other people's interpretations of a sound supervisor is say that you run a big show like Jersey Shore. When I was a sound mixer, I could not sound supervise Jersey Shore. Even the first season of the Great Food Truck Race that I did, I wasn't even sure if I could do that. But here I am to tell the tale. You basically, there's a lot of different interpretations of what this means, or right, what the title means. What I think it means is that everything is your fault. You are responsible for the success or failure of the sound team. And what I have learned is that, it's not like I get a raise if the show does well. There's no monetary incentive in there if the sound is better or worse than the previous seasons. It is, what it comes down to is a matter of your team's success. So on the Great Food Truck Race, I am given a couple spots of sound mixers, and then the rest are filled with locals. That's not my decision. That's the way it's always been. That's from the top all the way down, from way before I was even a part of the show. But just because someone's skill level isn't matched up with, say, like your number one guys, doesn't mean that failure is an option. It just means that you have more work cut out for yourself to make them succeed. Because the only way that you succeed is if your team succeeds. So things like a frequency sheet, right? On the summer season of Food Truck last year, we had 52 active frequencies going between cameras, IFBs, and lavs, right? And that is a lot. The coordination that takes, it was a learning curve, right? When I started the food truck race, I had never coordinated frequencies on a show that large before. And I basically had to learn it because there was no other option to. What I also found out is that not many people know how to do it, which was a little frightening at the time because I knew I had to do it, but I knew one person in my circle that knew how to do it. And then I found one guy on YouTube who knew how to do it. But I had to get it done. Like you basically needed all these frequencies coordinated so they wouldn't bounce into each other. So you wouldn't have all these teams blocking each other's frequencies out, and basically just creating chaos. It's everything from, like, if someone has like a question, it's like, hey, I've never used this mixer before, but somehow I found myself on the show, and it's like, okay, cool. Well, I'm not going to get mad at you because there's no point, right? But I am going to give you a crash course in how to use this, and thank God I know how to use it, right? The other thing is, I don't know everything. Like I think I know a lot. I definitely don't know as much as I'd like to know. And one of the things is knowing, what the rest of your team knows, right? I use the 688 a lot on there as a board for the cart, and I don't know it as well as I know the 788, but I have one of my number one guys that I bring on every season knows more than I do, right? And I'm not going to ask him to run the board. That's not his job. But I know I can rely on him if I need help with that, right? If I can't break out the manual real quick, go on the radio like, hey, man, do you know how to do this real quick? Cool. Good. Awesome. Problem solved, right? It is really knowing what your team members' strengths are and kind of trying to put them in those places so that they can succeed, right? Sometimes, difficult scenarios, are given where you feel like you're kind of set up to fail, like almost. And sometimes there's like no other way out of it other than to just, with the rest of the heads of the department, just be, completely honest, straight to the point. Basically, this is what I need. This is the support I need. can you help me out with this? And then, and then plan ahead. Planning ahead is the biggest thing. When you start the morning and you have a 6, or like 10-person team that, has a question, and you need to be able to answer all those questions in order to make the day go. And if you forgot to do something that has a knock-on effect that goes like it sets off all these dominoes to fall in the wrong way, then you need to own that. There's no point in creating excuses, especially for something that you did yourself. It's much better to just own it. Be like, hey, I screwed up on this part. I completely forgot. It's no one else's fault but my own. But I'd appreciate some help in rectifying it. So if you wouldn't mind, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And then drink beers on me at the hotel bar at the end of the night. Um, yeah, definitely. And man, it's not like there's like a bonus like out there. Like the reward is that you get to come back and do the exact same thing again. So, if we were talking about like the younger sound mixers before, or people that want to get into sound, and I would say, just if it's fine to try it out, and if it's a part-time thing, or if it's just a hobby, or it's just something, I would say to at least make sure you're having fun, because when I started in this business, there was a lot of these older guys who, some were great, but some definitely fell into this because for whatever reason, and they started paying rent with it, and they started paying their mortgage with it, and they did not like doing it. And it, to me anyway, it doesn't make sense to do something that you don't like, because especially in the audio field, there is a plateau, and a lot of people reach it very quickly. And after that plateau, there's nothing. So you have to really make sure that you like what you're doing, because you know there might not be an alternative. If you spent 10 years in the audio field and you're like, well, this doesn't make me happy, and you're like, now I need to go off and like learn how to do something else to pay for your kid's college education. Agreed. Agreed. And a lot of people are looking forward to the work coming back, and so am I. And I've probably made it obvious. The Great Food Truck Race is probably one of my most favorite shows that I've ever done. It's also super hard, and sometimes very stressful, but I do love doing it. But at the same time, it's like that show requires grocery stores and food trucks and restaurateurs and all this stuff, and it's like, who knows when it's come back. I would wish you come back tomorrow, but I just don't think that's possible. So in the meantime, you know, um, yeah, figure out one other thing. I mean, I do have hope. I've actually started this other YouTube channel called Quiet on Set, and the inspiration of it was some of the sound mixers, especially some of the local guys that come on my show. Um, it's sometimes the experience level varies. So instead of me trying to like teach on the day, I was like, okay, what if I could just give someone like a YouTube channel, like, hey man, I'm going to try to teach you everything you need to know to do a good job on set. And you don't have to be perfect, but at least if you have some knowledge, maybe some vocabulary of definitions of what we're talking about, then you'll at least have a head start. And sometimes you'll be better off than others, and that ultimately leads to uh, being more efficient on set, being better at your job. And then for me, it means, the success of you and the success of my team. Of course. Thanks, man. What's next? Um, in my free time, I really just work on these little extra projects, like I just said, quiet on set. Trying to put all my audio knowledge into some visual instructional form. That's an ongoing uh, project, and then Travelier, which is my app. It's called Travelier. Listen to the world. I also have another app called Dreamier. They both revolve around 3D soundscapes. I have in the actually here. I'll plug it right out. This is my 3D binaural microphone. And I attach this to one of my recorders, put it out somewhere in the field or walk around with it on one of the destinations or wherever I'm going for work. And it records basically the same way that we hear. It's got two ears. It's about the space between, this is like your head right here, right? So it's like this. So it records the same way that we hear, and we hear in 3D, right? We use distance, depth, and direction to tell, that'll see, hear what's going on around us. So when you wear headphones and you play back these recordings, you feel like you're in the location uh, where the soundscape was recorded. So Traveler has over 30 3D soundscapes. I think like 99% of the app is free. There are some stuff that's locked, like listen offline, but we have a subscription. It's super cheap, and it goes to just helping us pay for server costs and things like having an app, because Apple charges you just to put your app on the App Store, and all these little things that my partner and I have been paying for ourselves for years. And so we have just started this subscription. And Dreamier, which is the same thing, except it's seamlessly looped 3D soundscapes, more focusing on things like rain, nature, water falling, thunder, etc. So if you like that sort of stuff, you can go ahead and head over. You can download it and you can pay for it, and great. Or if you don't want to pay for it, also great. I'm just super happy if anyone uses the apps. Thanks, man. And I completely agree.